It is a completely incredible and honestly a pretty frustrating phenomenon. Like,
Hmm.
picture this. You're sitting on your couch,
Yeah.
right? You are reading an English article perfectly.
Oh, yeah, you totally understand it.
Exactly. You are watching a movie without subtitles. You are catching every plot point, maybe even, laughing at a really subtle joke. You feel entirely plugged into the language.
But then you step outside.
Right. The second you step outside, someone turns to you and asks a basic question, and just total paralysis.
The vocabulary just it evaporates. I mean, your mind goes completely blank and you find yourself staring back with this deer in the headlights look.
It happens to so many people. And today, in this deep dive, we are diagnosing exactly why that brain freeze happens. We are pulling apart a specific daily routine from a really practical guide to fluency to basically strip away the textbook grammar.
Because that grammar obsession is what's holding you back.
Exactly. The mission today is to bypass your internal translation reflex and force you to start speaking instantly. We are focusing on actionable habits.
Right, because the fundamental issue most learners face is that they treat a language like an academic subject. Like, traditional learning methods often confuse knowing a language intellectually with the actual physical act of speaking it out loud.
They are completely different things.
Entirely different. They are entirely separate skill sets processed in different ways by the brain.
The way traditional classes approach this, it really reminds me of trying to learn how to ride a bicycle by, like, reading a physics manual.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Right, like
Yeah.
you can study gravity, you
Yeah.
can read about momentum, you can memorize the exact angle the pedals need to be at. But if you never actually get on the bike,
Yeah.
you're going to fall over the second you try to pedal.
Because you are dealing with theory, not the actual physical environment.
Yeah, exactly.
And the environment of spoken languages, well, it's real time, it's high pressure, and it's highly unpredictable.
Unpredictable is the perfect word for it. But before we even discuss the mechanics of getting on that bike and building a daily routine, we have to look at the psychological barrier standing in the way.
The fear.
The fear. The single biggest roadblock preventing you from opening your mouth is this paralyzing fear of making mistakes, which is just heavily compounded by an intense pressure to sound smart.
Yeah, the source material addresses this by essentially telling learners to simply, well, embrace mistakes, to view them as necessary stepping stones rather than failures. Every mistake is a step forward.
Okay, but I have to push back on that a little bit. Because using simple logic to just wave away that fear, it feels completely disconnected from reality.
How do you mean?
Well, it is very easy for us to sit here in a studio and say, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
But when you are standing in front of a coworker waiting for an answer, or you are at the front of a busy coffee shop with a line of impatient people glaring at you,
The pressure is on.
the fear of judgment is visceral. I mean, the fight or flight response actually kicks in. So how do we actually physiologically lower that pressure in the moment?
That is the million-dollar question. And you are hitting on the exact biological mechanism that causes the freeze. When you feel that social pressure, your body releases a spike of cortisol, right? The stress hormone.
Uh-huh.
And cortisol physically impairs the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for memory retrieval and like complex executive function.
Wait, so it physically impairs it?
Literally. So when that barista looks at you, you aren't just nervous. Your brain is literally blocking your access to your English vocabulary.
Wow. Your brain is essentially like locking the filing cabinet because it thinks you are in physical danger.
Precisely. And the reason that cortisol spike happens in the first place is largely due to cognitive overload. I mean, we are adults. We have complex, nuanced thoughts in our native language.
Right, we want to sound like adults.
Exactly. When we try to speak English, our instinct is to translate those sophisticated adult thoughts using advanced English vocabulary that we just haven't fully mastered yet.
So we set the cognitive bar so high that failure is almost guaranteed.
Yeah, and that triggers the anxiety. So the antidote to this, and this is the golden thread running through this entire methodology, is the concept that simple English is good English.
So lower the cognitive bar to prevent the cortisol spike in the first place.
Yes. If you remove the pressure to sound like an academic, you drastically reduce the cognitive load. You bypass the anxiety trigger completely.
Because the goal of language is simply to transfer a concept from your brain into someone else's brain.
Exactly. If you construct a long, convoluted, grammatically unstable sentence trying to express that you are confused, the transfer fails.
So instead of scrambling for a phrase like, I find myself struggling to comprehend the intricacies of your previous statement, which is just going to make your brain crash.
Right, nobody says that.
You just say, I don't understand, or, I need help, or please explain again. It is really about stripping away the ego of wanting to sound smart and replacing it with the pure utility of being understood.
When you analyze how native speakers actually converse in everyday situations, it is overwhelmingly simple. They rely on short sentences, active verbs, and highly common vocabulary. The elegance of communication really lies in clarity, not complexity.
Okay, so we established this physiological shield, right? Rely on simple English to keep the cortisol at bay.
Right.
But simplicity still requires a retrieval system. Like, we need an actual mechanism to get those words out of our mouths on demand.
We need a routine.
Exactly. The source outlines this elegant closed-loop engine for daily practice: input, internalize, and output. Let's look at the first phase, input. Now, usually that means listening, but the focus here isn't on memorizing dictionary definitions, is it?
No, not at all. True listening, in the context of building fluency, is about absorbing the music of the language. Yeah, linguists refer to this as prosody. It's the rhythm, the stress, the intonation, and the natural melody of speech. When you watch an English movie or, listen to an interview, you shouldn't just be translating words.
What should you be doing?
Pay attention to how native speakers link words together, how they drop certain syllables, or how their pitch shifts at the end of a sentence.
Oh, that makes sense neurologically, because human brains are basically pattern recognition machines, and we process melody and rhythm far earlier in our development than we process actual meaning.
Exactly. Babies understand the tone of a sentence long before they understand the words.
So by focusing on prosody rather than just, data collection, you are giving your brain the structural scaffolding of the language. You are learning the physical shape of English.
Which makes it so much easier to reproduce later.
Right. But absorbing that melody is only half the battle. If that audio just sits in your short-term memory, it evaporates. You have to actually hardwire it into your active vocabulary.
And that brings us to the internalize phase, which tackles what is probably the most destructive habit in language learning.
The translation buffer.
Yes. The instinct to translate from your native language into English is the primary cause of conversational lag.
Think about the mechanics of this double translation process in a real-time conversation. It is like a computer trying to run way too many heavy programs at once, or like a really laggy internet connection.
It's exhausting.
Right. Step 1, the other person speaks in English. Step 2, your brain receives the audio and translates it back into your native language. Step 3, you formulate your reply in your native language.
It takes so long.
Step 4, you translate that reply into English. Step 5, you try to physically articulate it. By the time you reach step 5, the conversation has moved on. The other person is just looking at you, waiting. You are buffering.
You're buffering. The cognitive load of that 5-step process is massive. It is mathematically impossible to achieve conversational fluency if you are running that translation loop for every single sentence. You have to remove the middleman.
So the source offers a fascinating, incredibly simple hack to bypass that native language interference, right?
Yeah, constantly narrating your daily life in your head using basic English.
Just in your head. So you are making breakfast and you just think, I am pouring coffee.
Yeah, you.
You are leaving the house, you think, I am opening the door.
Notice how perfectly that aligns with the rule that simple English is good English. You're not trying to debate philosophy in your head. You are creating a direct neurological link between a physical action or an object in the real world and the English vocabulary.
You look at a cup, and the concept of cup fires directly into the English word, completely bypassing your native language's word for it.
Exactly.
It sounds almost trivially simple, but you are literally rewiring the circuits in your brain to prioritize direct access.
Which perfectly sets up the final and really the most critical phase of the engine, output. All the input and internal narration in the world won't make you fluent if you don't engage the physical machinery of speech.
Action over theory.
Action over theory. The directive here is focused action. You must practice speaking out loud every single day, even if it is only for 10 minutes.
Now, 10 minutes feels surprisingly brief. The prevailing myth in education is that real progress requires locking yourself in a room for an hour of intense, grueling study. Why is a 10-minute micro-session actually superior?
It comes down to how the brain builds and retains habits, specifically through a process called synaptic pruning and consolidation.
Pruning, like a plant.
Sort of, yeah. The human brain is highly efficient. It constantly filters out information it deems irrelevant to daily survival. If you study English grammar for 3 hours on a Sunday and then don't use it again until the following Sunday, your brain tags that information as non-essential.
And it starts pruning those neural pathways.
Right, because you aren't using it in your daily environment.
But if you force your brain to recall and produce English out loud every single day, even just for 10 minutes, you trigger the mechanism of spaced repetition.
Exactly. You are constantly signaling to your brain that this language is an active, necessary tool for your daily environment.
So the brain responds by strengthening those connections, coding the neural pathways in myelin, which drastically increases the speed of recall.
It is the difference between walking down a dirt path once a month, which will just grow over with weeds, versus walking down it every single day until it gets paved into a highway.
That's a great way to look at it. And there is a physical component here that is often completely ignored, right? Speaking is a motor skill.
It is heavily physiological. Your native language has conditioned the muscles in your jaw, your tongue, and your vocal cords to move in very specific patterns for decades.
Oh, right. So when you speak English, you are demanding those same muscles perform entirely new acrobatic routines.
You have to physically train your mouth to produce sounds that might not exist in your native tongue. You cannot build muscle memory by thinking silently. Those 10 minutes have to be vocalized.
So the daily engine is complete. You take in high-quality input by listening for the melody. You internalize and cut the translation buffer by narrating your life in simple English. And you produce output by physically training your mouth for 10 minutes every day.
Simple, actionable steps.
But a beautifully tuned engine running in an empty garage doesn't get you anywhere. Language is fundamentally a social tool. You are learning this to connect with other human beings.
Yes.
Taking these simple sentences and this neurological rewiring out into the real world is where the true test lies. And the source is very direct about this. You need a speaking partner.
Whether it is a friend, a language exchange partner online, or, a supportive coworker, the reality of language acquisition is that your fluency scales in direct proportion to the volume of words that leave your mouth in an interactive setting.
It is about building momentum and dealing with the unpredictability of another human being. But when learners finally get in front of that partner, or any native speaker, another psychological trap snaps shut. The speed trap.
Oh, the instinct to rush.
We speak quickly, we slur words together, we try to fire the sentence out as fast as possible, and the psychology behind it is fascinating. We aren't speaking fast because we are fluent. We are speaking fast because we are uncomfortable.
It is a total anxiety response.
Right. We want to escape the spotlight, get the interaction over with, and just rip the Band-Aid off.
The irony is that speed acts as an amplifier for mistakes. When you rush, you artificially shrink the window of time. Your brain has to retrieve the correct vocabulary and formulate the physical sound.
So you stumble.
You inevitably stumble, which spikes your cortisol again, throwing you right back into the panic state we discussed earlier.
But when you intentionally slow down, you change the entire dynamic of the conversation. Speaking slowly doesn't make you sound hesitant. It actually projects authority.
Absolutely. Think about anyone who commands a room when they speak. They take their time, they pause, they don't rush to fill the silence.
Slowing down provides your brain with those crucial extra milliseconds it needs to reach for the simple, effective phrases you have been practicing. It prevents the system crash.
And it creates a positive feedback loop. You speak slowly, your brain has time to fetch the words, you articulate clearly, the other person understands you.
And then your brain registers that success, keeps the cortisol levels low, and your confidence naturally rises. You give yourself the grace to operate within your limits.
It really ties the entire methodology together. If you accept the premise that simple English is the ultimate goal, you no longer need to hide behind a frantic flurry of complex words. You can speak with measured, deliberate pacing, knowing that clarity is far more impressive than speed.
Let's distill this entire system down, because the beauty of this framework is that it requires absolutely zero textbooks, and you can start at the moment you finish this deep dive.
Right now.
Exactly. First, recognize the physiological reality of your fear. That brain freeze is just a cortisol spike caused by aiming too high. You neutralize it by lowering the bar. Embrace simplicity. I don't understand is perfectly engineered communication.
Simple English is good English.
Second, run the daily engine. Listen not just for definitions, but for the melody and rhythm of the language. Neutralize your translation buffer by narrating your environment in simple English, directly linking objects to the English vocabulary.
And physically train your facial muscles by speaking out loud for 10 minutes daily.
Right. Leverage that spaced repetition to force your brain to keep the pathways open. And finally, take it into the real world. Secure a speaking partner, increase the volume of words you produce, and actively police your speed.
Project confidence through slow, clear articulation rather than rushing to escape the interaction.
It completely reframes the entire endeavor. It takes language learning out of the realm of academic testing and puts it firmly in the realm of practical human behavior.
And consider the implications of that shift. If language is fundamentally just a physical tool used to connect two minds, we have to ask ourselves why we treat it like a strict exam we are terrified of failing.
That's a great point.
Right. When we obsess over perfect grammar and advanced vocabulary, are we actually trying to communicate or are we just performing?
Performing, yeah.
The moment you stop treating English as a test to be passed and start treating it as a simple bridge you get to cross, the entire process changes.
It really turns it from a high-stakes performance into a simple connection.
Right.
You don't have to be an architect to walk across a bridge, and you don't have to be a poet to use a language. You just have to be willing to take the steps.
Yeah.
So stop trying to do dry land push-ups. Get on the bike, accept that you might wobble at first, keep it simple, and just start pedaling.